Hello and welcome everyone to this new episode of Greatest Business Minds on our digital TV channel Forbes 15. My name is Klaus. I'm the editor-in-chief of the German-speaking edition of Forbes, and every Wednesday and Thursday at 5:30 p.m. I meet the most interesting founders and entrepreneurs, CEOs and executives from the German-speaking region. Today's guest is Naren Shaam. He's the founder and CEO of travel booking platform Omio. He was also our cover star about a year ago, a bit more than that. And Naren has been and his company have been heavily affected by this. Travel in Europe is down, air travel is down 95%. And since Omio makes its money on bookings and transactions in the travel booking sphere, this is obviously a huge blow to them. But already Naren is looking up, is staying optimistic, and I'm quite excited he's here today. Naren, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Klaus.
Give us a bit, Omio is Berlin-based, you have 5 the world, you have 400 employees. Give us a bit of an idea of how the last few weeks have been for you. Travel is one of the most affected industries. How is it for you with 400 employees as a founder of a travel booking platform, both personally and professionally, to experience something like this?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a word to express the emotions of the last 5-6 weeks. It is turbulent. It is testing times. It tests resilience, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of green shoots, and I've seen the strength of the company and our people. It's because we have an office in China. We were lucky to have some upfront notice on what's happening if it spreads. So we started modeling some of these cases. Last week of February, first week of March, we had already modeled out 3 scenarios on how to run the business in terms of if the pandemic extends only to parts of Europe, global lockdown because we have customers from everywhere, or it stays in like China or let's say greater Asia region. So we're able to do that already and prepare for the steps. And then, of course, no one expected that it would hit so hard. It's beaten even the worst case scenario we had modeled. Again, these are unprecedented times. Our revenue bookings went down from, high growth numbers year on year to almost minus, 95% of the revenues disappeared in 1-2 week time period, basically. So I've never seen that wild a swing ever before. So it's not even for me a crisis that you can go read up the books on and say how to experience, because it's choked both supply and demand across geographies, and with the amplification of social media and news being available readily everywhere, it created further panic in markets much faster than ever before. So I think this is unprecedented times, and so what we did was, as soon as we found out, we set in place a clear plan on how do we actually navigate through this. To almost provided us like guiding principles on how to do that. And happy to cover some of that, but of course we have to adapt that as more information comes in.
We're going to talk about what's going on in the travel industry and your prognosis on that. But before we do that, for all the entrepreneurs, founders, executives watching, you said that you got some information from China, not already expecting the full scope of this, but knowing something was up. As a founder, as the CEO of a company, talk us through the steps you took. I know from the story we did that Omio is already quite cost conscious. So it's not like you're burning money as you want, but what are the steps you can take to really dampen the impact this has on a company?
Yeah, so we went through 3 phases as a company, and I'll tell you which phase we're in. The first phase was mainly what we call acknowledge and adapt. So the first thing for us is, do we acknowledge? Even internally on management, we had many debates on, is this going to come out of China? Is it going to impact Europe, etc. So as soon as we realized that we need to at least create some formal element of how to manage through that, we called it a COVID-19 task force. So we set up a task force and we created basically 3 work streams inside that. How do we protect our employees, number 1? How do we protect our customers if this hits? And then the third one is business. How do we protect our business? So we had 3 work streams, fully cross-functional from across all departments coming together. And then as soon as it hit Italy and it started coming into Germany, we started a clear message around we need to manage to cash. So that's the primary pillar in terms of manage to cash is our primary goal. So whatever you're doing, you need to start managing to cash. There's no more like investment. It's mainly save the business. So stop all perks, etc. And that message was something I was encouraged by, because most employees also started looking at these managed to cash and coming up with ideas on, brought down server costs by 50-60%, or everything else that you can stop doing perks, reduce unnecessary spend, etc. We started moving to a weekly investor reporting. So this was in the acknowledge and adapt, and there's no kind of start end date for these phases. It's fluid as the information goes along, and somewhere along that journey we were very much in the middle of a crisis, because at the early thing we said acknowledge and adapt is set up these work streams, set up a task force that brings together these 3 work streams, and then give clear manage to cash guidelines. I think this is probably every company that has not done it or has done it, we're here. So maybe the more important thing that's useful for other founders or entrepreneurs or other people like me going through this is the second phase, which is managing through the crisis, and then the third phase, which is looking ahead. So we're still through the crisis. We're probably at the eye of the storm. It would be a mistake to prematurely start looking ahead and start doing that. We just need to make sure that the manage through the crisis is concrete, and we go through this with strength. And so here what we've done is, first of all, manage to crash, there's no pun intended, managed through cash is still the underpinning strategy that we're going through. But then our comm strategy has evolved to be as transparent as possible, communicate as frequently as possible. So I talk in front of the company once, sometimes twice a week, including an email.
The whole company.
To the whole company, yeah, in terms of all hands, etc. And the third one is concreteness. So in order to not create fear and panic, we only communicate when there is a concrete bit of information. So I try not to predict. There's always questions on job losses, what happens, how will product look, and we try to not comment on stuff unless we have concrete information. So these 3 pillars are established as our internal comm strategy, and then we started going to manage to cash in terms of first / all non-essential costs like perks and everything. Second one is we managed out, I think, majority 3/4 of our freelancers out of the business. Unfortunately, tough times, you have to start somewhere. And then the third one is we moved our most of our employees into Kurzarbeit for a period of 3 months. So this is where we are currently. And again, these phases are fluid, and we're at the same time modeling what the industry will look like, what business looks like. So when we actually come out of it, it's built on fundamental analytical principles that help us move in whatever direction based on what happens, rather than just, subjective opinions on this will happen or that will happen, etc. So that's kind of the phase we're in. The only other thing outside of the business context that I would recommend or give advice is, it's tough. Nobody wants to be here. If you've hired a management team as an entrepreneur, they didn't sign up to come and manage through COVID. Like, no one wants to be here. Like, it's not something we asked for. So make sure that your team and your management and people stay strong and united. That's number one. And the second is find a balance. So like for me, home office, family, remote, a lot of people are struggling with ill family members, older parents that they cannot see or may not see, or all of these questions. So it's really important to find the balance in terms of fresh air, going for a run, whatever activities you do. But it's really, really critical that as a leader of the business, that you keep a sane head on your shoulder, because that'll help you drive through the crisis in a sane way. Because ultimately, not every company will survive, and if you are one of the survivors, by design, you're going to be stronger than everybody else in the market.
You mentioned this before. There were no layoffs as of now at Omio, but a large portion is in Kurzarbeit. We still don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be another shutdown. We don't know how different European markets where you mostly operate are going to develop. But how do you deal with these trade-offs that you have? Let's say this hasn't happened, but let's say laying off a certain portion of people to save the company. How do you personally deal with that? How can you make sense of these trade-offs?
Yeah, I think that those are hard trade-offs, and those are trade-offs that most of us, at least as entrepreneurs, have not live through to learn from experience to then, okay, here's something I've done in the past and here's how you emotionally go through that. So it's a first time experience for a lot of people in general. So I strongly correlate in terms of how do we make sure our people are protected first in terms of health, safety, and then economic situation. So the first thing we did as management is I took 100% pay cut as long as even one employee is in Kurzarbeit. And a
So
lot
you're
of
not getting paid anything at the moment.
not even a penny. But that's not just me. Most of management also chipped in up to 100%. So that gave a sense of at least shared burden in that, hey, we're not doing this for fun, but we're all in this together, and here's skin in the game for us to come out of this. So that's the first decision, and this was already a hard decision for me because I know even on the management team, not everybody's on the same economic situation. Some have families, so it's a hard thing when you're so close to people to even go through. So that's the first. And of course, you know like I said, when you think through layoffs, all of this, you don't want to prematurely say anything that you haven't modeled out or what comes. But my sense is if you have to go through it, the trade-off is, do you want to protect as many jobs as possible where the company doesn't go under and you have to now find 400 people have no money to feed their families and need to go out on the street and try to find something, or do you have to do layoffs? So the balance always comes back to how do you protect as many jobs as possible. Do you fundamentally believe that travel will come back? And I strongly do, and I'll touch on this. So then what is the best way to navigate out of this with the cash position we have, because it's harder to raise capital in these markets. So the primary criteria has to be protect as many jobs. That means protect the business. And if you protect the business, you're going to protect as many jobs as possible. May not be 100%, and the percentage varies based on your specific cash situation, etc. And your U.S. companies have laid off. As the jobless claim there is insane, double-digit million number. But before you even go there, I think we're lucky to be in countries like Germany where there is Kurzarbeit. We can take advantage of that. Now the government is coming out and saying you can extend it beyond 6 months if necessary. So you want to take advantage of these programs that are in place to maximum before you have to make the tough decisions. But at the end, if you have to make the tough decisions, the trade-off is very much, do you protect as many jobs, which means you protect the business, or not, and you just need to make sure you make that trade-off.
Mm. I mean, you mentioned it already, getting to like the overall picture in the travel industry. I looked at the data, and it was surprising that aircraft travel, for example, air travel is only down 50-60% globally, but in Europe you have countries like Germany where it's down 95%. Yep. I mean, you're active in Europe and you recently expanded to the US, but give us a bit of a picture of what the situation is currently looking like in your markets, and maybe also a bit of an outlook and forecast of what you see, because you said you see travel coming back. How quickly and how strong travel will come back?
Yeah, I think so. All our markets are down roughly 95%, including the US, because we are still new in the US. We mainly focus on East Coast corridor. That's where we launched, and as you know, it's impacted heavily in the East Coast, with New York being the highest. So unfortunately, all our markets are down 95% today. We are seeing still some bookings. And interestingly, I almost always wonder, like, who are the 5%? Why are they booking it? What are they doing? Because as a travel company, the biggest thing we've done in terms of customers, we changed the website or app to say, instead of inspiration to travel, we literally say stay home. I mean, that's painful. It's opposite to the purpose of why we even exist when we have to say stay home. But that's the right thing to do for the customers, to stay home, flatten the curve so that we can actually come out stronger, and we support governments in terms of in making sure that we encourage people to actually stay home. In terms of, so that's the current situation. It's pretty much like I said, at the eye of the storm, in terms of is hopefully as worse as it can get, and hopefully it can only get better pending first, second wave happening. But if that ever happens, my sense is that it will be better than the first time, because governments are more prepared. People know how to react. You've gone through this once. Information availability is much more. People are saying you have to wear masks. So the second time around is a lot more thorough and short-lived, hopefully, than the first time. Because the first time, there's so much around acceptance of, hey, I'm stuck at home for a long period of time and I should not go out. And it took a long time for people to even accept not to go to the park and hang out in groups, etc. The second time will be much, much quicker. In terms of travel coming back, look, I fundamentally believe that as long as humans exist, humans will travel. This is the purpose of the company, create the inherent human need to explore the world, explore cultures. I mean, I would love to come to Vienna and have this coffee with you in person and go look around the city. I mean, that's what brings joy to all of us. And I don't know anyone who would disagree with that statement. So there's an inherent need to travel. And so what Corona's done is it's bottled this demand and put a very tight lid on that. And so what's going to happen when you open that lid? That demand will flow out. So maybe the first thing you do is go visit your parents or your grandparents to make sure they're okay. And the second thing you do is you do a local trip instead of flying across the world. Maybe there's regional travel between Europe, inter-European segments. Maybe I go to Austria and or the Netherlands because I believe it's safe for whatever reason. So travel is going to come back in pockets, but it's going to come back for sure. I think airline industry will be impacted a little more heavier than multiple modes of travel, so we can adapt to consumer needs very easily. I think that information will become critical because consumers will seek to know, hey, which countries are open? Do I have to do a test? Do I have to go to the train station an hour before, like the airport? Like, do I have to go to the airport 2 hours before? There's a lot of open questions. So that's going to be a critical criteria on how companies enable people to travel. And the last one is the products will have to change around flexibility, consumer mindset. Like I said earlier, China rental car market is back 70% as before. That's huge in terms of, we're still 4 months in since the lockdown and it's already back to 70% of it. That tells me that, certain markets will come back, the pricing will change, flexibility, options will be different in terms of fare, and we'll have to adapt. It would be naive for us to hope that the world after Corona will reflect somewhat of the world before Corona. And if you prepare for that, then clearly you're going to miss the boat, in my view. So you have to almost imagine what the new world will look like, make a few bets. You may be wrong, but that's our current position in terms of travel. Will come back for all the reasons I told you, not necessarily in the way it was before. People may not go to kiosks. It'll accelerate online shift. Like there's many ways in which this will come back in the way I envision.
Starting looking at the clock and starting to slowly wrap up, but we have two questions that we got from the community, from our social media. One of them is, and it kind of fits nicely to what we just discussed. You said that you are convinced that travel will come back. Do you have a scenario? Do you have a point in time in the future when we will see, let's say, mid-January or mid-December 2019 levels again? Which scenarios are you working on?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, with a big asterisk, that I would be a fool to predict anything right now, given the situation. But I can just tell you the few models, like all the ones I've seen, and this is not something that's our view in terms of, the industry view is it'll take at least a couple of years before travel is fully back to normal. So 2022, if not a year after. 21 will be lower than 19, or if you're this is the market as a whole. If you're high growth, you can make up for that. Hopefully specific segments will come back faster. Like I said, rail, ground transport will come back faster than air. So that is the current case. I don't believe this year will come back very strong. It will be very slow pockets, people more cautiously. Hopefully by next summer, at least European travel, if not non-Europeans coming into Europe, European travel and inter-European travel will be quite strong by then. Because remember that entire economies from Greece to Spain and Italy depend on tourism. Of course, they have other industries too, but tourism is a critical part of their economies. So I think that governments and hopefully people will figure out ways to enable this industry to come back.
And the second one that we got, which I think is a nice closing question because it ends on an optimistic note. What good has come out of this crisis for you at Omio? What have you learned? What have you adapted? What do you think will stick as a positive outcome of this? It's good to see that you're not putting your head in the sand, but can you talk to one or two things that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there is the from a people perspective, this has brought us as a company hopefully closer. Us as a management team a lot closer. We all spend a lot of time together, so it has brought us closer. It has brought us closer to the roots. It's time when you rethink the 10,000 projects you're working on. Does it actually make sense, or what is the core of why we exist? So it made us completely rethink on what we call keep the lights on core, and what are like nice to haves in a normal scenario which you wouldn't even consider, and now you would like, it doesn't make any sense. So that's definitely a positive. I think in terms of unity around people really being conscious, and we have to act in unity, is something stronger. Of course, not every person needs to make their own decision, but people coming together in terms of let's all flatten the curves, a lot of social media posts, people actively self-monitoring is really a positive. I've seen a lot of benefits on the environment. I hope we can learn from that, and see what we can do to the environment, because this is a positive. But again, the one worry I have is people start driving cars more because of safety reasons, and then we're back to the same place. So that's a worry. But overall, that's definitely a positive. I think we're going to make it. Like, it's of course it's going to be tough. We have to be realistic. It's not going to be a straightforward ride. So don't be naive in terms of, hey, this is going to be. We're going to make it exactly the same as before. The world is going to be different. The old world we lived in is no longer existing. Like I said, this crisis will be written in this whole situation. Corona whole thing will be written in the history books of the future, and us as humans, how we did it, and came out of it in unity, and hopefully making sure that we take the valuable lessons from this and imagine a new world that we define as, here's the world we want to go to, and drive towards that. Because it's like when you're building a company, every year there's always a target, there's a metric, there's a target, there's something to hit. So you're constantly running because you don't have the time to think. You have the next target, the next week numbers, the next board presentations, the next fundraise. There's always a target, and you're always moving. But now there is no target. I have no revenue targets. I don't know what targets to give. So it makes you rethink purpose at a much deeper level, and that's the same on a human level as well, in terms of what does it mean, and where do I want to go, and where do all of us as the world want to go. And if we lose this opportunity and not define that very clearly, we're back to exactly where we were. And that's not going to be the case, because the world has changed. So each one of us defining where we want to go and redefining purpose is really, really, really good, because then we drive the world we want to be, and we're not driven by what happens around us, and we want to go there. And I think as leaders, as human beings, we just have to drive in that direction, because we want a world to look this way as people. So hopefully that's a big positive for me. If everybody's able to reflect that, I think that will be a very big positive.
All right. As I said, trying to end on a positive and optimistic note. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Thank you, Naren, for taking the time. We are done for today. If you like what we do, there's a subscribe button somewhere here, I think. Watch through our other videos. We're trying to put out as much valuable content as we can at the moment. And we start again at Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. with my colleague, Andrea. Naren, all the best to Omio. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope to be able to book a travel soon again with you guys.
Thanks, Klaus. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.